Welcome to another Ocean Ideas Talk, brought to you by ocean lovers.
My name is Sophia, better known as PlasticFreeSophia, and today's panel discussion will be talking about young ocean crusaders and the next generation leading the change to protect our oceans. So, the first question is for Cal. Climate anxiety is described by the Harvard Medical School as a distress caused by concern about the impact of climate change. It has become especially prevalent amongst young people who are deeply worried about the future of our planet. So through your Blue Minds workshop, I would love to know about how you explore the topic of eco-anxiety. How have you seen it affect your friends and the students you speak to? What are practical solutions you can suggest for managing these feelings?
Yeah, for sure. I might just get a show of hands actually before I start. Who here is concerned about the environment? Everyone here. That's something that we're finding more often than not. So with Blue Minds, we've been travelling the country, speaking with thousands and thousands of young people, not just people that love the ocean, but full year groups. And when we ask the question, most young people's hands go up. And not just the young people are concerned. There was a study by a research organisation down in Melbourne that found that 67% of young Australians' mental health is actually being impacted by climate distress, by fears of the future. So it is very scary, I guess, what is happening currently. But the way that we like to go about it with Blue Minds is this idea that the future is unwritten. And when we look at all the different scenarios that what the future could look like, as young people, we have such a big role to play to really try to redesign this future for the better. So some of the things that we do, we sort of run the students through, we call it the 3 A's. So the first A is awareness, and actually trying to go from the future thinking, the past thinking, but actually present in the moment. So run through all these different mindfulness activities and to try to connect with your senses. So a nice piece of advice for anyone here, if you are feeling a bit anxious, just really trying to, focus on your breath, just really trying to focus on what you can see, hear, feel and touch, to just really try to, be grounded in that present moment. And then we run through appreciation. So what does the ocean give us? What does the environment give us? So that gratitude. So really just thinking about, all right, well, reflecting on gratitude actually releases all these positive neurochemicals and makes us feel good. So that's a really important step with our workshop. And then the last thing's action. And I've always had the mindset that hope lies in action. So as long as we're doing something about it, we'll feel better about the future. And yes, we might not be able to change the whole world. Like not even Donald Trump can change the whole world as much as he'd probably like. But we can all change our own individual world. And I truly believe as young people, we have such a superpower to create amazing change. So it's a bit about what we do with Blue Minds.
Yeah, that definitely deserves a round of applause. Jess, you have done such incredible work with the shark net removal. I just want to know, what was your aha moment? What sparked that journey?
That's a really great question. I think that similarly to what you were just saying, we as young people are so consistently affected with climate anxiety and this deep inherited stress that we are in a world that's set on self-destruct by the people who came before us, and we just have to sit back and watch it burn and there's nothing we can do about it, when that is so far from the case. Here in Australia and all over the world, people have this what can I do mentality, and that is instigated in so many portions of their life. They don't care if they litter, if they treat someone with cruelty, because if everybody else does it, what does it matter if they do? And I've been on a very passionate journey to try and change this mindset in as many people as I can, because I think we've got Taylor in the room who has this amazing quote. She actually, I'll get to that in a minute, she really inspired me with the Nets Out movement. But it's like one ripple can change any tide in a wave of endless possibility. And that's exactly right. One person can introduce you to more than you could have possibly imagined. And we as people, as human beings, are inherently curious. And I think that people who stop learning and stop improving their curiosity and growing and finding new passions, they really limit themselves and put themselves in that box and therefore don't continue to grow. So for me personally, I've been consistently on this journey of growth and trying to find new ways to inspire people to care about our environment. And that led me to environmental journalism. And I was a national TV news journalist for a year, where I met some incredible people and got to introduce the world, or Australia, to some amazing environmental stories. And where I live on the Sunshine Coast, last year we had 7 humpback whales caught in the shark nets. This is the most there has ever been. You guys have shark nets here in New South Wales beaches. They look a little bit different than they do where I'm from, but it's the same concept. And I just thought this was beyond devastating. I knew someone personally who had to rescue a whale from these shark nets, and they put themselves in such a dangerous situation by doing this, They could have gotten seriously hurt or in serious trouble, but they put themselves out of their comfort zone, went out there and took action because they knew that that was their responsibility. As a young person, as an Australian, we need to take that action. So after learning that and having the opportunity to interview these people and incredible shark activists like the two lovely ladies I see at the back of the room, Briley and Taylor, Sunny Coast shark legends, I was just so empowered and inspired. And I said that education is so important, and conscious concern and improving your knowledge and curiosity is so valuable, because so many adults especially, we're talking in a room of young Crusaders, so I think we're all inherently curious and we all care about the environment, so we're trying to find new ways to learn and grow our skill set. But a lot of people close themselves off to that, to new possibilities and new solutions. So it was incredible for me because I knew what shark nets were, but I'd never thought about how destructive they were for our environment. Not because I didn't care to learn, but because no one told me. And within a few minutes of chatting to these empowering people who spoke with passion and spoke with love for our earth, I realized something had to be done. They inspired me, I caught the bug, and I haven't stopped since. And I think that we are all on this journey, everyone in this room is on that inspiring, passionate journey to hopefully just grow that circle of influence to other people, no matter if that is with the shark nets, with cleaning up the beaches like Take 3 for the Sea. What an incredible organisation. All these little initiatives and people doing their bit is growing their circle of influence and hopefully expanding that knowledge. So I guess I just, fell in love with the people who were doing it and wanted to do the same.
Cal previously just touched on this, but this idea of hope. And Daisy, I know your book On Hope talks about this, and I want to know, how do you balance that urgency of climate action with hope?
So I have a bit of a different story in that I didn't join the climate movement with any element of hope in my system. It was more just kind of panic and fear. And I got to grow up in the school strike for climate movement, and we had these huge protests with over 300,000 people around the country, and we had a very oppositional government at the time. And then we went through this huge summer of bushfires, and we saw no climate action, but we also saw the country kind of stand up and go, this is enough, at the 2022 election. Elected a wave of teal independence, elected a more progressive government. But we're now, I think when we talk about hope, I don't know that I operate on, I don't know that what drives me is hope. And I think it's more the kind of pragmatic approach to what we're dealing with climate-wise, which is that we're not, and I hate to not put as optimistic a picture of community building as these two have, which is fantastic. But we are now at a very different point politically to what we were 3 years ago. We're at a point where it's less progressive. There is actually more support for the independent movement, and that's very exciting. And the social license for climate action is still there, which is amazing, but it's no longer an issue that people are voting on. We know that it's something that middle-aged women out in the country are really concerned about, really supportive. We also know that women aged 18 to 34 in the cities are the biggest undecided voter cohort. Isn't that interesting? So as a young woman in the climate movement, I think it's really important that if you're not involved, find a way to get involved, find a way to get involved in these community projects. But remember that this election directly impacts you, it concerns you. It's very important that we don't have a government coming in that barely believes in climate change and is willing to back a policy that was maybe viable 30 years ago, but is deeply unsafe 30 years from now. I'm talking about nuclear. Get involved at a community level. I mean, I gather all of you kind of mostly here in the Waverley Council area. It's very, very important to get involved with advocacy this election, get involved in a tangible way at a community level, go door knocking, and have those conversations with your friends. Start those conversations at the lowest level possible, because that's where you will reach the highest level of trust and the biggest level of change.
Jess, we know that communication is key, but when it comes to discussing topics like climate change, it can be really difficult with your friends and family. I think we all have that Uncle Bob. It's really hard. But your challenge is, especially when it comes up to the upcoming election, how do you engage in meaningful conversations with family members and friends?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my whole life I've known that being a voice for the earth was going to be my future. I just didn't know to what degree or what path or what angle to approach this with. And I made my way through a bunch of different things, tried to shape my industry, shape my world to fit into what I thought was needed, and then realised that, end of the day, you just got to stay true to you and follow your passions. Once I figured that out, it got a bit easier. But having those conversations, especially with people who, I've had bosses in the past who didn't even believe in climate change. And I, as a journalist, I'd always prioritise environmental stories, and I'd get made fun of in the office and be called a greenie. And it was just, there are always going to be, no matter what mission you're on, whether that be environmental or political or any field of your passion, if you are deeply passionate about it and you know that it's true to your core, there is always going to be people rebuttaling you. You are going to face constant hurdles, and it's going to make you so much stronger if you can just get over that. It's so cliche, but I love this little quote, and it's like, use the stones thrown in your path as stepping stones, because your life only makes sense your life can only be lived forward, but only makes sense looking backwards. And it's one of the most frustrating but incredible parts about existing, especially in this time when we as young people have such a voice. We have access to social media, which we can reach hundreds of millions of people at the touch of a button, and we can influence them and impact them and hopefully motivate them to make environmentally conscious decisions, because caring about the environment shouldn't be a topical issue. It shouldn't be like a clique or a niche. It should just be in our inherent nature, because we all need the earth to survive. We all need the ocean. It's not something that should be popularized.
Yeah, I resonate with that quite a bit. My uni teacher recently called me an environmentalist, and I was like, no, I'm just somebody who cares about the earth and cares about living here. Daisy, we know that young Australians are driving for climate action like never before, with Gen Z and millennials now representing the largest voting group in Australia, which is something very exciting. And their influence on climate change is stronger than ever. In your context, with the Duty of Care climate bill aimed to hold the government accountable for protecting young people and the future generations, what are the next steps to the bill, and what are you expecting in terms of its progress in the upcoming months, especially as we have a federal election?
Yeah, so one of the most exciting things I've ever gotten to do is start working in legislative advocacy, which I realise does not sound exciting on the face of it. I get it. But I started getting involved with Senator David Pocock in about 2022. He became a senator for the ACT, and what happened was that there was a court case, and there were 8 young people under the age of 18 led by youth litigant Anjali Sharma, who sued the government, saying that the government had a duty of care to protect young people and future generations from the impacts of climate change. They were successful in suing the government. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And what happened was then Susan Lee, who was then the Environment Minister, came back and appealed that decision. So saying that the government actually didn't have a duty of care to protect young people and future generations, that they had no responsibility in the long term. And they weren't completely successful in that appeal, but basically the court case ended up on ice, and the federal court judge said that it was a decision that had to be made through the parliament, and it was not a decision that could be made in the courts. So Anjali is, okay, so look us up on Instagram afterwards, Duty of Care campaign. Anjali is one of the most incredible people that you will ever meet, because where most people would have given up, she moved down to Canberra to start uni, she got in touch with her local senator, and she set up a bill called the Duty of Care Bill. And the Duty of Care Bill is to legislate that duty of care through a federal parliament. And what it is, and this is going to sound complicated, but I'll break it down. It's called a fossil fuel disallowal mechanism, which is basically our Environment Minister and our Climate Change and Energy Minister, Chris Bowen and Tanya Plibersek, keep saying that they can't stop these coal mines and this gas exploration from going ahead. They can. There are all sorts of complicated legislative discussions as to why they can, but the answer basically is they can. And the Duty of Care Bill is to actually prevent them from allowing explorations to go ahead that create more than 100,000 tonnes of carbon emissions per annum. It all sounds complicated. It's not. Basically, what it means is it stops even moderate explorations from going ahead that are going to do further damage to our environment, that are going to do further damage to us. We're actually on a really amazing renewables path at the moment. We're a lot more reliant as a country on renewables energy supply than you think we are. And by 2030, that'll be even more so. And so when we think about the fact that the government is still doing these massive approvals for coal mine expansions and for gas exploration, especially Woodside over in WA, that's hugely concerning. We don't need to be doing that. And so that's why the bill came about, and that's why the bill is in Parliament. And as a young person, what was incredible for me to witness was the impact that young people could have on a parliamentary level. So what we did was we invited 26 young people from around the country to come meet with their local representative in Parliament. And we had a day where we had something like 35 meetings with parliamentarians to talk about this bill, and we got major pledges of support. We got over 20 pledges of support, including from an assistant minister for this bill. However, Labor has a majority. Labor do not want an independence bill to go ahead. It's something that Allegra Spender is very familiar with. A lot of debate is actually shut down by independents about specific legislation because government just does not want to have that debate. And so where the bill currently is it went through a Senate report, it went through a committee inquiry, it went through all sorts of things that I won't bother going into, but it's currently on ice. And where we're at as a country is that we've got a lot of social license for climate action, but it's not an issue people are voting on. So one of the key issues that we're focused on in this election is getting people out and about voting on climate change. It's very important that we're voting in progressive candidates who have good climate policy platforms. And so that's what's really exciting for me, is to see young people at a community level, nationally, at all levels, getting involved with climate advocacy, particularly young women. You're an exception. It's really exciting. My major point of encouragement is that all generations are needed. One of the key things I hear from like Gen Xers about my parents' age is, we're really glad that your generation is doing this. Your generation is going to save us. And we're flailing over here. Please help us. Get involved at every level. Get involved in the advocacy. Help us out, especially in the lead up to the next election. It's a really exciting time to be working in climate advocacy, so get involved.
I actually have a follow-up question for that. This can be directed at both of you. I was having a chat with some friends yesterday because we know that this election is so important in regards to our future in Australia, particularly with, you mentioned nuclear energy. There's a lot of debate around this at the moment, and we as young people, we know that our voice in Australia matters, we know our vote matters, but there's just so much misinformation out there, and especially for young people who may not like watching the news, which is very common in our generation, who may get a lot of their information even from social media, which of course can be extremely biased. Where would you recommend finding a reputable and accessible source for young people to gain a proper informed opinion before voting for the environment?
Yeah, for sure. So one of our friends is actually building a website called Build a Ballot, which will be launching in the lead up to the election, and it's pretty much going to be super localised to where your electorate is, and you pretty much fill in a quick questionnaire of what are your values, and I think that's the most important thing. I actually got elected as Sophia mentioned, as an independent councillor last September, gave it a crack and got elected, which was really cool. But experiencing, I guess, young people when they were to vote, a lot of them had heard of me and I guess knew to vote for a young person. But there are a lot of people that just go and say, oh, to your mum and dad, oh, who do you vote for? And I'll just vote with that. And I think that's the biggest risk, if with 50% of this upcoming elections vote, actually, how do you encourage young people to vote with your values? So this website, Build a Ballot, that's going to launch, fill in a quick questionnaire, and then it aligns sort of your own preferences of sort of who you should align with, but you can change it and sort of create your voting day plan as well. So highly recommend looking into that once that launches.
I'm just conscious of time, and I would love to open up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for our amazing panellists? Okay, before we wrap up, can I have a quick... Put your hand up nice and tall if you have a question. Yeah, up the back.
Not a question, but very quickly, the previous question asked about getting information. Have you ever heard of the conversation? I don't know how many people subscribe to that. It's a journalistic style website written by scientists, lawmakers, etc. That's where they should look.
100%. Probably avoid Sky News, I'd say. But yeah, definitely like conversation. There's so many great independent media outlets that are doing great work.
For any young people that are wanting to kind of just keep in touch with the political zeitgeist, and you're also, I mean, I don't know how many young people here are familiar with like shameless media, which is like, so there's a similar kind of tangential podcast to that called Cheek Media, and it's called Big Small Talk, and they tackle the kind of cultural and pop culture conversations of the week, as well as what's going on politically here in Australia. It's really interesting. It's run by Hannah Ferguson. I would highly recommend tuning in. The other thing is the Daily Oz, which is another young person's media outlet, which is really good for reliable information about the election.
I really enjoy Cheeky Media. Just before we go, one quick sentence of how young people can make a difference in this world.
Goodness me.
One sentence.
One sentence. Focus on your circles of concern, control and influence, because you are capable of so much more than you could possibly imagine. And if you just expand that circle of influence, focus on your passions and believe in yourself, we as a community and you as an individual can achieve great things.
Awesome. Just building on to that, just say, we've got one planet, one ocean, one life. So just give it a crack and don't have any regrets.
Go door knocking. In the lead up to the federal election, I'm out here every weekend, 5 hours of my life. You don't need to do that to yourself. Don't do it. But door knocking, exactly right, about building community level trust. The place you're going to have the best conversations is going to be within your community. Connecting with people who might be a bit on the fence, who just need that kind of extra nudge or that extra conversation about how they can get involved with climate advocacy or where they should be putting their vote. Don't underestimate what kind of level of influence you have at a community level. So get out there, get involved, start having those conversations. It's a really exciting time to be doing this kind of stuff.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Ocean Ideas. Please make sure to share it with your networks and help us in our mission to turn ripples of action into waves of change for our blue planet.